All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is 5:01. Welcome, everyone, to the August 19, 2026 meeting of the Lānaʻi Planning Commission. Let the record show we have quorum. We have Michelle Fujie Ka'au Amo on camera. Anybody with you, Michelle?
Nobody's with me.
Okay. David's on camera. David, anybody with you in the room?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Nikki's on camera. Anybody in the room with you, Nikki?
No, I'm alone.
Okay. Erin's on camera. Anybody in the room with you, Erin?
Hi, Chair. No, I'm alone.
Okay, thank you. Sandy, anybody in the room with you?
Yes, my two sons.
All right. And I am, oh, and Lisa, anybody in the room with you?
No, sir.
Okay, and I too am alone. So before we go to housekeeping and public testimony protocols, want to welcome Lisa to her first meeting, although she was approved and was not able to make the last meeting. So glad to have you on board, Lisa. Finally, want to say a few words? Want to say a few words about who you are and why you wanted to join the LPC?
Sure, yeah, and just for the record, I did watch the recording of the July meeting, so sorry I had to miss that. My name is Lisa Galloway. I've been a resident here for 17 years on Lānaʻi and 26 years in Hawaii. And half of that time I've been a high school teacher, and the other half I've been working at the university, and I'm just about to retire, so I can give you my best.
Thank you. Well, again, welcome on board. So some housekeeping stuff. All the commissioners need to be on camera throughout the meeting, and all votes will be by show of hands. Public testimony protocols. Anyone in attendance wishing to testify, please sign up in the chat with Leilani. Please provide your name and which agenda item you wish to testify on. Until such time that you are called, please mute your audio and video. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and testimony is to be directed to the Planning Commission. And lastly, the Lānaʻi District Office and the Planning Department Conference Room are also available for people wanting to testify. So, on that note, we'll move on to communications. The University of Hawaii and Ocean Networks, Inc. will provide an informational presentation and project update of the proposed Hawaiian Island Fiber Link, also known as HIFL project, an inter-island subsea fiber optic cable system intended to improve and expand high-speed broadband access throughout the state of Hawaii. The project includes the construction, operation, and maintenance of a subsea fiber optic cable system with cable landing sites on the island of Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, Lānaʻi, Maui, and Hawaii Island. The proposed Lānaʻi cable landing site is located at Mānele Small Boat Harbor and connected to the Lānaʻi Education Center, Island of Lānaʻi, TMKs 4-9-017:006, 4-9-017:027, and 4-9-006:065. So at this time, I'll turn this over to Lisa Ketley. Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. May I share my screen? We have a presentation to share.
By all means.
Can you guys let me know when you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Aloha, Commissioners. Thank you for having us today. As the chair mentioned, we're here to share with you about the Hawaiian Islands Fiber Link, or HIFL project. This is an important project that's being proposed by the state, represented by the University of Hawaii, together with Ocean Networks, to provide critical infrastructure needed to ensure reliable internet access and connectivity for communities across the state. My name is Lisa Ketley. I'm a senior planner and project manager with Tetra Tech based on Oahu. We've been contracted to assist with the environmental review and discretionary land use permitting for the project. As I'll share later in the presentation, we are currently working through the environmental review process. We aren't through the discretionary permitting stage quite yet, but we are seeking SMA approval to conduct archaeological subsurface testing as part of the historic preservation review process. I believe county planning staff will speak more to the SMA requests a bit later, but we wanted to just take this opportunity to provide a presentation to share a little bit more broadly about the overall project, familiarize you with some of the details, and answer any questions that you may have. You can see here the presentation is going to cover, we'll share some background and history, an overview of the specific project components and the proposed location on Lānaʻi, the permits and approvals that we anticipate obtaining, and then we have I do have a few slides that focus more specifically on the archaeological subsurface testing. So just to start with a little bit of background, over the last several years, the state's been working to understand the specific needs of communities across the state, and is through that effort has found that there is an acute need to address high capacity broadband availability across the islands. Broadband is essentially what enables high speed internet, and it's considered critical infrastructure, not just for businesses, but for all of us as residents. You can see on the graphic just some of the ways that we depend on broadband in our daily lives. So everything from online education to telehealth appointments, ATM machines, gas pumps, emergency response services, social media, and online entertainment. So it's very ubiquitous in our daily lives. The vast majority of broadband around the world and in Hawaii is provided by subsea fiber optic cable. There are other technologies that can provide broadband, primarily satellite, but those technologies have a much lower capacity. They're slower, they're less reliable than fiber optic cable. So fiber optic cable really is the gold standard for delivering broadband. In Hawaii, the existing subsea fiber optic cables that provide broadband to each of the islands are aging. These systems are reaching the end of their design life, and they're no longer able to meet current or future demand. In addition, there's also communities across the state that have limited or no broadband access at all. And these deficiencies have been known for some time, but really came to light during COVID, when we all became so much more dependent on the internet for remote work and telehealth and online access and the rest. So in response to these issues, the state developed an initiative called Connect Kākou, which is focused on multiple aspects of broadband access and availability across the state. The initiative has multiple pillars and the opportunity to leverage federal funding to assist with some of those pillars, particularly what's referred to as middle and last mile. So just to explain a little bit about what those terms mean, given our unique island geography, Hawaii requires several different types of infrastructure to enable broadband connectivity. So there's what's called first mile infrastructure, and this is essentially what connects Hawaii to the global internet. There's middle mile infrastructure. This is what, once the broadband is in Hawaii, this is what distributes broadband to each of the islands across the state. And then there's what's called last mile infrastructure, and this is basically on each island what takes the broadband capacity out into the various communities, to individual businesses and homes. So the HIFL project would provide middle mile infrastructure, again, taking the broadband that comes into the state and making sure it's distributed to all the islands, including Lānaʻi. So this slide shows various projects that are being pursued through the Connect Kākou initiative. There are multiple projects going on right now trying to take advantage of federal funding that's been made available. The orange and purple lines represent new first mile infrastructure that's being proposed, and those would interconnect into Oahu to bring the global internet to Hawaii. The blue line represents the HIFL project, which we'll talk about more as we move forward. And then the black line is a project that's being pursued by Hawaiian Islands. That's also a middle mile project similar to HIFL, but it's focused on reaching other parts of certain islands to provide additional access and redundancy. None of these projects are dependent on one another, but they would complement one another to help build a more robust system across the state. The projects are all being pursued independently, but there is a degree of coordination happening to try to take advantage of synergies and avoid potential conflicts. One important point to note, as you can see on the map, HIFL is the only system that's currently, the only new system that's currently being planned that would include a cable landing on Lānaʻi. So at the moment, this is the only system that would be in place as existing cable that services Lānaʻi phases out. Based on what is shown on this map, or in addition to what's shown on this map, there are also last mile projects that are being pursued. Again, these are on individual islands, seeking to improve infrastructure to get out into individual communities. So from here, I'm going to focus in a little specifically on the HIFL project. As I mentioned before, HIFL is being proposed by the state, represented by the University of Hawaii. It would utilize federal funds that the state obtained via the U.S. Treasury Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund. The state went through a competitive bidding process and selected Ocean Networks, a company that specializes in subsea fiber optic cables, to assist with the project. Ocean Networks is bringing private investment dollars to the table, and together with the state, we'll be forming a public-private partnership that would own and operate the cable system. In terms of the overall system design, the project would distribute broadband to the 6 main Hawaiian Islands and is being designed to meet future projected demand on each island with a capacity that far exceeds the current infrastructure. The system would be open access. That essentially means that any provider would be able to use fiber on the system. This is a distinction from systems that are built by individual providers, where they're the only ones that can use the system. Having multiple providers on the system would provide options for end users. The system is designed to have a minimum design life of 25 years, but in many cases, this type of infrastructure continues to provide substantial capacity well beyond the design life, and that would be expected to be the case here as well. And lastly, because of the relatively short distance between islands, this system does not need to have any repeaters, which means that it does not need to have power. So it would just be a passive fiber optic cable with no electrical components. So that means no EMF or other emissions. So getting into just a little bit more detail here, the project would involve both marine and terrestrial components. On the marine side, it would include 5 cable segments that would connect to a landing site on each of the 6 main Hawaiian Islands. The 6 landing sites that you can see listed on the map here are all strategically located based on a detailed routing study. That process considered several specific design objectives for the system. The first objective was to directly interconnect with an established telecommunications hub on each island. And what this means, it would enable existing network operators to access that capacity using their existing network infrastructure without having to develop any new infrastructure. Second objective was the use of state-owned property wherever possible, because this provides a necessary level of security and control, as well as cost-effective use of state resources. And third, diversification of the cable landing infrastructure relative to existing middle mile infrastructure, because this helps to increase resilience and reliability of the state's overall system. So there were multiple cable landing sites and corresponding cable routes identified on each island and identified based on those design objectives, as well as a whole host of other criteria It's included engineering feasibility, constructability, access, impacts to recreation and public uses, bathymetry, offshore characteristics, sort of a whole host of criteria that were considered in selecting these sites. The sites that were selected through the routing study were then further refined through a due diligence process. And each of these 6 cable landing sites will have a similar set of components, and I'll walk through those now and explain to you a little bit more about what those components would look like. So starting with the subsea cable, would have a maximum diameter of 1.1 inches. In fact, some sections of it would be even smaller in diameter, about 0.6 inches, but the largest diameter would be 1.1 inches. This is about the size of a garden hose or a highlighter pen. You can see that photo for scale. The cable would be surface laid on the seabed, so it's designed to conform to the contours of the seabed and is simply laid down on the ocean floor. So there's no trenching or burial involved. And once it's placed in areas with sand and soft sediment, the cable would self-bury relatively quickly. The cable's pretty flexible, and in the nearshore waters, divers can be used to manually position the cable. So this is an approach that can be used to make sure that it achieves a very specific route and can avoid sensitive resources if there are any that are present.
Excuse me, Lisa.
Yes.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Danny, since this is just communications, is this just an FYI, which means we are not having to take any action on this agenda item? Is that accurate? Or any of the planners, Kurt, Robin, Danny?
Hi, Chair. This is Robin Miles. And yes, that's correct. There's no action taken today. This is just for informational purposes. There will be a future permit on this that will come before this body later for action. There is a small SMA permit on the agenda today that is related to this project, that is about the archaeological testing as part of the due diligence process. So this is just kind of gives context so that when you now see the smaller SMA too, that you'll understand what's happening.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Lisa.
Okay. Okay, so in reference to the subsea cable, so I was sort of explaining how the cable is installed. It's surface laid on the seabed floor. To bring the cable onshore, the project would use what's called horizontal directional drilling, or HDD, to install the cable under the shoreline. So this is a technique that's specifically used to install, particularly linear types of utilities in a way that avoids impacts to sensitive areas such as the shoreline or other features by installing it deep underground. So in the case of this project, and you can see in the graphic in the lower left, there would be a drill rig that would operate from an onshore area set inland from the beach or the shoreline, and it would use a drill pipe to install the conduit under the shoreline and punch out in a designated location in the nearshore waters. And that would result in an underground conduit that can be used to bring the cable onshore. So this graphic shows all the components that would be part of the cable landing on each island. You can see the HDD conduit that I was just describing. Again, it's drilled using specialty drilling equipment from an onshore area, going under the shoreline, punching out in nearshore waters. And this would allow the cable to be brought onshore without needing to trench across the shoreline. At the end of the HDD conduit, you can see that that black box. I'm not sure if you guys can see my cursor as I move it, but this black box here, what this represents what's called a beach manhole. It's essentially an underground concrete vault where the subsea cable would terminate and be spliced into meet with terrestrial fiber optic cable. Terrestrial fiber optic cable would be used to connect the subsea cable from that BMH or the beach manhole to the existing telecommunications network on each island. Depending on the island, this would be a combination of new terrestrial cable installed in underground conduit. That's what's represented here by the dashed lines under the ground surface. In some cases, there would the project would also use existing fiber that is owned and operated by a licensed utility on the existing utility network. On most of the islands, there will be what's called a cable landing station, either a small modular building or a space in an existing building with equipment to facilitate the interconnection. The chair referenced in the introductory remarks referenced the Lānaʻi Education Center. It's just recently been determined that the project actually will no longer need to use that facility. There's no longer a need for a cable landing station on Lānaʻi. The project will, and I'll share this on the future slide, the project will interconnect with existing utilities down at the harbor. And there are existing conditions which basically preclude the need for a cable landing station on Lānaʻi. So looking specifically at the map down at Mānele Small Boat Harbor, this shows all of the terrestrial infrastructure that would be installed. So just to quickly orient you, the pink boundary that is shown, again, if you can see my cursor, I'm just kind of referring to this outer boundary. This is the outer, the overall study area that was defined for the due diligence and environmental review purposes. It was intentionally defined to be a larger area than what was needed just to allow for flexibility in the design refinement process. Within that study area, you can see the location of the proposed infrastructure. So the HDD conduit is this pink and black dashed line. We'll look at another view of this on the next slide, but this, again, it extends from the beach manhole to the near shore waters and would be drilled under the parking lot and the shoreline. The beach manhole, which is the green dot down in the lower left-hand corner of the map, it would be located in the, for those of you that are familiar with the harbor, there's a gravel median right between the boat wash and the dry dock area. You can see the photos on the right-hand side. The lower photo is a direct view of that gravel median area where the beach manhole would be installed. And then from the beach manhole, there would be new terrestrial cable that's represented by the green line on the map that would extend, that would be installed underground along the edge of this harbor access road up to an existing manhole that's located right adjacent to the harbor entrance, to that entrance road. This terrestrial cable would also be installed using HDD specifically for the purpose of minimizing ground disturbance within the harbor. There would need to be a little bit of trenching up in this final stretch before meeting the manhole, just because this area has a lot of existing utilities that need to be avoided. At this manhole, again, this is represented by that orange cross up near that entrance road. There are connections with existing carriers, as well as existing state-owned fiber, which runs all the way up to the existing telecommunications hub up at the high school. And up there are existing connections with the various state and county entities on the island. And so that is what precludes, those connections preclude the need for a cable landing station in this case. All of the staging and laydown, the drilling equipment, all the construction activities would occur within the blue shaded areas. So that's primarily down here, the lower left-hand corner, down in the dry dock storage area. And then again, a very small area up here surrounding the beach manhole. And overall, the goal is to minimize the disturbance of the harbor facilities and make sure that all of the surrounding areas can continue to be accessed and used throughout construction. So that includes the boat wash, the parking lot, the boat ramp, and the shoreline. Once construction is complete, all of the infrastructure would all be located underground. So there would be nothing that's visible, and there would be no impact to access or use of the harbor facilities. So this is just another view of the HDD conduit. On the top, you can see an aerial or a plan view. Again, this shows the approximate path between the beach manhole, which is this black dot here over by the dry dock storage area, and the punch out over here on the right in the nearshore waters. And then this on the bottom half, you can see what's called a profile view. So this shows essentially the depth of the cable relative to the ground surface. So the cable path is shown here in red, and then the ground surface is up here shown in black. So what you can see is from here, the beach manhole, from this point, the HDD goes deep fairly quickly as it passes under the shoreline. So here you can see the breakwater right at the shoreline here. You can see that represented in the cross section. You can see at that point, the HDD would be about 50 feet or so below the ground surface. And then as it punches out here in the nearshore waters, this location was chosen very specifically to be out beyond any corals or hard ground. This was verified through dive surveys. You can see the photo in the lower right. That's of the proposed punch out location. It's entirely sand bottom. As I mentioned before, the cable, once it's installed, it's fairly heavy, so it'd be expected to self-bury fairly quickly and sit down below the surface. This is just a high-level overview of the construction process, just to share information about what can be expected during construction. Before any work is done, there would be all the necessary safety measures and BMPs put in place to minimize potential impacts to the surrounding areas. As we saw in that previous figure, those kind of blue shaded areas, there would be a temporary construction work area, again, primarily down in that dry dock storage area. There would be temporary fencing installed around that area just for public safety purposes. The construction equipment would be brought in and staged in that temporary work area. And then the HDD conduit and terrestrial infrastructure would be installed. So that includes the beach manhole and then the HDD subsea cable, as well as that HDD for the terrestrial cable leading up to that manhole. Once that infrastructure is all in place, the subsea cable would be installed. And how that happens is there would be a cable ship that is positioned offshore. That ship would have cable on big reels, and those reels would be used to basically pay out the cable from the ship out into the ocean with a series of floats on the cable. You can see that represented in that little cartoon at the bottom. There would be divers in the water that would pull the cable, and they would incrementally cut the floats to allow the cable to sink down slowly down to that punch out where the HDD conduit punches out. And they would basically lower down the cable, and there would be a leader line in that HDD conduit, and they would tie that leader line to the cable. And then the crews from shore would pull that leader line, which would essentially pull the cable through the conduit up toward the beach manhole. As they're doing that, the divers would continue to incrementally cut the floats and allow the cable to sink down and get pulled in up to the beach manhole. Once the cable has been fully brought ashore, it's up into the beach manhole, the cable ship would pull away, and it would slowly pay out the cable as it pulled away, and that cable would be allowed to slowly sink down to its pre-designated route. Overall construction is expected to take about a month or so from start to finish. In terms of the in-water work, there would be divers in the water for the final stage of that HDD drilling at the punch out, just for that end, as they're completing the HDD, that would be no more than a day, probably a half a day to a day of divers out in the water. And then the subsea cable installation similarly is expected to take no more than a day, a half day to 1 day for that cable landing site. This is just a high-level summary of all the permits and approvals that we expect to be required. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's just intended to share with you that there are, quite a few permits. It's a pretty robust set of requirements. We are in the early stages of these permitting processes. At the federal level, authorization is needed from the Army Corps of Engineers to lay the cable in the ocean. This triggers several federal consultation requirements, including Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. At the state level, the project does trigger HRS Chapter 343, so we're in the process of completing that requirement. A draft environmental assessment was published earlier this year, and we are working toward finalizing that document now. There are multiple state level permits that will be needed, in particular, a submerged lands easement for laying the cable in state waters, as well as requirements for work in the conservation district. And then at the county level, given the HDD, crossing the shoreline, the project will need approvals related to the special management area and shoreline setback. So given all these requirements, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and there will be lots of opportunities for input along the way, but we have made a fair amount of progress and just want to share the consultations that have been done to date. The team has hosted a series of community meetings across all 6 islands, including 2 meetings on Lānaʻi, one in the spring of last year, another one just earlier this month. We have conducted a cultural impact assessment and kapa'akai analysis. This effort included a consultation letter that was sent out to a pretty extensive list across all 6 islands. There were over 30 individuals and organizations that participated or provided referrals to that process. As I mentioned just a minute ago, we are working through the 343 environmental review process. Through that effort, we sent out a pre-assessment scoping letter as well as distribution notices for the public review of the draft EA. There's been Section 106 and 6E consultation. To date, this effort included letters that went out to more than 200 Native Hawaiian organizations and culturally focused community organizations, commissions, and boards. To help support that historic preservation review process, Pacific Legacy completed a literature review and field inspection, or an LRFI. Through the consultation process and based on information contained in that LRFI, we did receive a response from the State Historic Preservation Division formally requesting an archaeological inventory survey, or an AIS, with subsurface testing. So based on that request from SHPD, Pacific Legacy developed a subsurface testing strategy. That strategy was shared with cultural descendants in each ahupua'a, as well as participating NHOs, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the various island burial councils for review and input. As part of that process, we presented to them the Maui Lānaʻi Island Burial Council, and we did receive approval of the testing strategy from SHPD. One item that I do just want to note for this group is that the testing strategy for Lānaʻi was subsequently revised to reflect a refinement in the design. That refinement involved moving the beach manhole to that gravel median, as I just showed in those maps, which I just shared with you. The revised testing strategy was specifically shared with the cultural stakeholders and was again approved by SHPD. So for these next couple slides, I'm going to transition to talk very specifically about the archaeological subsurface testing, because that is the near-term work that we are looking for an SMA approval for. This slide just provides a bit of background on the results of previous archaeological studies conducted within a half mile of the project area, as well as the results of the pedestrian archaeological survey that was conducted for this project. That graphic on the left shows the location of historic properties based on previous archaeological studies. The blue outline represents the project area. That basically corresponds with the pink outline that I shared with you on the previous figure. So what you can see is there's no historic properties that have previously been identified in the project area. However, there are quite a few historic properties in the vicinity. This reflects the intensive pre-contact use of this area. It includes habitation, agricultural, ceremonial, and burial sites. There are also post-contact historic properties in the area, primarily related to ranching activities. Based on the pedestrian survey conducted for the project, 2 potential historic properties were identified along the far eastern edge of the project area. Those are right down near the shoreline. You can see that in the graphic on the right. this is a concrete ditch and a stone wall, likely related to post-contact ranching. And if you recall back to that HDD profile, given the depth of the HDD profile in that area, you know, about 50 feet below the ground surface, the project wouldn't impact those features. So for the proposed subsurface testing, based on the request and approval by SHPD, the strategy includes one trench for the cable landing site on Lānaʻi, and this would provide 100% excavation of the beach manhole. It would be about 5 feet wide and 7 feet long and up to about 6.5 feet deep, again, in that kind of gravel median area where the beach manhole would be located. The subsurface testing work would be conducted by a qualified archaeologist that holds a current permit with SHPD in coordination with a local on-island equipment operator. It would involve the use of a backhoe, basically taking a series of shallow lifts in that area where the beach manhole would be located. If non-burial cultural deposits are encountered, the archaeologists would switch to manual excavation. If burials are encountered, all work would be halted and the appropriate parties would be notified immediately. Subsurface testing is not proposed along the terrestrial conduit route, that again, leading between the beach manhole and the existing manhole, because this would be installed using HDD, so there would be no surface ground disturbance. As I mentioned, there would be some trenching in a short stretch leading up to that existing manhole next to the entrance road. However, subsurface testing is not proposed in that area because it's heavily congested with existing utilities. So just to summarize, in terms of the near-term steps, we are seeking SMA approval to conduct archaeological subsurface testing, as Robin referenced in her comments. Once that work is complete, the next steps over the long term include wrapping up the environmental review process, as well as the federal and state historic preservation review processes. This would include post-field work consultation, as well as submittal of the AIS report to SHPD. Following those processes, we would be focusing on obtaining, completing environmental review and focus on obtaining the discretionary permits with the goal of starting construction in the second half of next year. And that concludes our presentation. We're here to answer any questions. There's many members of the team also joining in on this call. There are folks from University of Hawaii, as well as Ocean Networks, and Pacific Legacy as well, the archaeologist on the project. And we are all here to answer any questions that you may have.
Right, thank you, Lisa. Before we entertain questions or comments from the commissioners, we'll open it up for public testimony. Leilani, anybody in the chat or in the planning department conference room?
There's no one in the conference room or online, Chair, signed up to testify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roxanne, anybody in Gabe's office?
There's nobody here at the district office.
Okay, thanks, Roxanne. Okay, at this time, I will close public testimony and open it up for commissioners' questions and comments. I can't see everybody at once, so just jump in if. Okay, Erin, go ahead.
And thank you, Lisa. That was really, really interesting and thorough. So we appreciate that. Can you one more time just clarify from the beach manhole to, I guess, the site that it would be going, there'd be no digging or trenching along that route?
Yeah, would you like me to share the map again? Would that be helpful?
Sure. I just wanted to, because it's a line, so I just wanted to make sure if there was digging or trenching. The reason that I ask, I guess, it might just be a me thing, but at the end of that, there's a section of road that was closed for years because I don't know what happened, but we were not able to drive through the parking lot, and it was really challenging going over to Maui and doing our our supply trips. So I just a little bit sensitive to that area and making sure that, you know, it's thoroughly thought of, that nothing can happen, because we cannot have that close again, in my opinion.
Understood. Yeah, so I can share, and then if Cliff Miyake is on the phone, he can jump in with additional details as well. But so this pink and black line that's the subsea cable that would be installed entirely with HDD, so no surface disturbance. And then this green line would also be HDD, so it'd be drilled from back here, popping, and that drill would pop up here. If you can see, there's a kind of a blue box up surrounding here, surrounding where that beach manhole, or I'm sorry, where that existing manhole is.
Yeah.
Basically, there would need to be some trenching just basically to make that turn into the manhole. I think there's a bunch of existing utilities there that they basically have to sort of thread through to make that turn into the beach manhole, or I'm sorry, into the existing manhole. So there would need to be some trenching right there within the limits of basically what's in that blue box.
Okay. I know it's professionals and everyone will do their due diligence. Like I said, I think I'm just sensitive because that right around that area to the right of it, we had it closed for years.
Short span there. That short span of trenching there is in the dirt area on the other side of the road. So yeah, we were well aware of where the road had sunken in for a long time, like you said. So we took the engineering was done to make sure that we wouldn't recreate anything of that type of situation, and we would be far away from that area that was had sunken down with the, I think it was a water pipe broke or something, and it kind of undermined the area under the road. So the work we're going to do won't do any kind of damage like that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions, Erin?
No, that was it for me. Thank you all again. That was really, thorough and lots of information.
All right. Any other commissioners with questions or comments? All right, if not, I will throw out some things that I attended a community meeting a couple of weeks ago. So Lisa, could you tell us how HIFL will be used, or who will use it after it's completed?
May I ask Cliff and or Christine? I think they might be a little more equipped to answer that question.
Yeah. Chris, did you want to talk about the state's use and county and departmental use?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Christine from the University of Hawaii, representing the state. So as part of the contributions to the project from the state side, we obtained the CPF funding from the federal government and are contributing about half of the cost to the project. The state of Hawaii gets a pair of fiber across the entire system, and we will be using this to connect all state agencies, including state government offices, Department of Education, schools, public libraries, and the University of Hawaii between all islands. So from the Lānaʻi, the state pair would get connected to the manhole on the side of the road, and we would use the charter fiber as part of the cable franchise agreement to extend it up to the Lānaʻi school, where we would install our state of Hawaii optical submarine fiber system equipment that will allow us to get it out to Maui and I think it goes to Molokai on the other side. And then we'll extend that connections from the Lānaʻi school to the Lānaʻi Ed Center across the street, to the public library, which is on the same campus, as well as the state government locations. All of that connectivity is already established, so there's no new fiber builds that we have to do on Lānaʻi. It's just adding an additional path off the island. So that's the state government side of things. Cliff, you want, oh, and one other thing, because of the state's contributions, the key thing that we get off of this system, other than the fiber pair, is that there's no recurring cost to the state for the use of the fiber pair for the life of the system. So that's like 25 to 30 years. So there's no cost to the state. So this is why it is such a good deal for the state to contribute this funds, because we get it for a long time with no additional costs. Cliff, you want to talk about the commercial side?
Sure. On the commercial side.
Hold on, Cliff. Hold on,
Mhm.
Cliff. Chris, got a question. So regarding state of Hawaii, so all state departments will be hooked up to the hub at the school. DOT, DOH, DHS, Harbor Division.
All of the existing state agencies that already connect to the state network on Lānaʻi will obtain connectivity through this. I know the harbors, the airport, the radio station up at Puʻukilia, the Lānaʻi School, Lānaʻi Ed Center, Lānaʻi Library. And additionally, we're also helping the county out. So we'll be connecting county offices on Lānaʻi back to Maui and Molokai through the state pair.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Cliff,
You're
go
welcome.
ahead.
Sure. The commercial users, currently we have two of the larger entities in the state already signed up to use the system, and that would be Hawaiian Electric and Charter Communications, Charter Spectrum. So the cable TV and that will be using the system. The current connection into Lānaʻi is the Hawaii Island Fiber Network, and that is jointly owned by Hawaiian Telecom and Lumen. That system is now 29 years old. As of June was the anniversary. The systems are designed for 25-year technical lifespan, so it's a little beyond that. And I, in discussions with Hawaiian Tel, they project within a few years they will have to turn off the existing connection to the island, and that's why we are really working hard to bring the new system in, HIFL. And with that said, Hawaiian Tel, we are in discussions with them to be on the new system as well, so they can continue to connect to Lānaʻi. And I do have a meeting next week with Lumen for, and they're also interested. We have also been in discussions with Verizon and AT&T for the wireless side of things. And I think they're waiting for us to get a little further in their permitting to have much more in-depth discussions on use of the system.
Thanks, Cliff. Could you comment, do a compare contrast on the current capacity versus this new system? I think Lisa didn't talk about how much you guys are going to be able to transmit over this new cable.
Okay. Yeah, each pair of cable, each pair on the system, and we're bringing 6 pairs to Lānaʻi. Each pair can transmit up to 20 terabits of traffic per second, which is exponentially more than exists today to the island. I can't really quantify exactly the ratio right now, because the amount that's in use by the existing cable is kind of proprietary to the companies running it. So I can't really give you that ratio. I can just say what the new system will be able to do.
So at Coffee, one of the questions came up is, will the subsea cable be secured to the ocean floor?
It lies on the ocean floor in deep ocean, and when in the channels and as it approaches the island, it's quite safe there. As we get closer to shore, we put some armor on the cable to protect it, As we come into the harbor, when we transit in right to the punch out, what we do is after we have the cable down, we will put what's called articulated split pipe on top of it, which is made of steel to add further protection in the harbor. And because of the additional weight of that split pipe on the cable, with the tidal currents and things, and it being sitting on sand, it within a short time, it kind of buries itself into the sand and it kind of goes under the sand, so you won't see the cable after a while. And it kind of gets a natural protection in that fashion.
Okay, I can't remember at the meeting who talked about it, but somebody mentioned about the lubricant that you guys are going to be using and how after it's installed, the farmers here might be able to use that for their agricultural ponds.
Yes. So what we do is when the conduit, when the boring machine is working and boring out and pushing the conduit, it spins, and you put some lubricant on there to help it smoothly go through the path. But we reclaim that lubricant and pull it back to shore and pump it into holding trucks. So at the end of the job, we do have that. And on the mainland, they found they can actually line irrigation ditches and holding ponds, and it holds the dirt, and it creates like a subsurface where the water, doesn't, it's not as porous, so the water will stay longer in the holding ponds. And yes, if any of the farmers would like it on the island, we'd be more than happy to make sure we can get it. Well, we would work, of course, with Puloma Lanai to, get the right permissions to transport it and do it in the right fashion.
Okay, looks like David and Michelle have questions. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chair. May have missed this. Is there an anticipated valuation for the landfall construction?
You're looking for just the cost, or?
Well, mostly because I was curious if this is going to fall under a minor permit or a major permit. So I was just curious if those costs had been.
I think that I'll let Lisa perhaps answer that one, because working with the permit.
That it would be an SMA major.
It'll be a major. Okay. Yeah. And then one other question was, is there on the, it's going into this existing, I don't know what it's called, the education center. And is that a lease that's ultimately going to govern the use of that building?
No, so the state pier will be extended to the Lānaʻi School, which is state-owned on state property. So we'll put all our equipment there. And we already have existing fiber connections to the Lānaʻi Ed Center, which is leased. So we'll extend the UH connectivity over those existing fiber connections.
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle.
I was just curious, during the installation time, or as you guys are going through and I guess figuring out the connection, is there going to be any downtime, or is there any disruption in service? Because you're listing quite a few of our main hubs in terms of internet connectivity or even service connectivity. Should the public be concerned? I know that they said 1 day or two to create some of this, but in terms of is there going to be downtime in service?
So as far as the state network and the DOE and the UH and library system, this is adding an additional path to the existing system, which is running over the HIFL cable right now. So we will turn that up in parallel. And eventually, once hyphen goes away, all the traffic will seamlessly switch over. As I can speak on behalf of the carriers, they'll do the same thing, right? So everything is coming over the hyphen cable. They'll turn the high full capacity up in parallel, and they'll either send traffic out both ways, or they'll seamlessly shift it either way.
Mahalo, thank you. That answered my question.
Sandy.
Is regarding the life expectancy. So what happens when, okay, 25 years, 35 or 30 years when you're saying that it, expires, like the use of it, what happens then? Like what happens to all this cable and like, the upkeep, the sustainability beyond your projected life expectancy? Can you speak on that?
I can speak to it quickly, and then Cliff, if you want to add a little more detail around it. So I think I mentioned in the presentation, and I think as Cliff alluded to with the hyphen cable, these systems do have life beyond their design, the design life. They do continue providing capacity. So I think the intention would be for it to operate as long as it is providing value. As long as it's continuing to be used, providing value, it would be used. If it comes to a point that it is no longer providing value in the form of providing that service, there are other ways that these systems provide services, and Cliff can provide a little bit more detail to that, but it's things like research, monitoring across the ocean floor, and so it can be converted into a support role for those types of functions beyond just broadband delivery into the island. Cliff, maybe you can give a little bit more of the examples of the way that you guys have seen these systems converted.
Sure. In fact, we have a division of our company that we do that kind of work. We currently have a system that's in operation off of Guam. It was a retired system, so it was an old system that actually had been shut down for 5 to 8 years. We went in and resurrected it, got it working again, and we work with a high net worth kind of research group. And what they've done is we got the cable operational again for them to the cable station. They went out and put underwater sensors on the bottom of the ocean that can measure temperature, it can measure pressure, it can do climate monitoring, pollution tracking. And so that's some of the things you can repurpose a system. And I believe the cable right now is about, 35 years old, but still functional and still collecting data, which the group we work with distributes out to like research and education groups across the world for that part of, the people that want to monitor that part of the world. So that's one of the things we can do with the cable. And a lot of times, if the cable totally goes out of service, it normally stays on the bottom because it doesn't present an environmental risk. In fact, a lot of times, shortly after installation, within a year or two, you'll find a lot of coral colonies and a lot of marine life starting to attach to the cable, seagrasses and thing, and the cable for some reason becomes like a part of the bio environment down there. And to pull it up, sometimes you do even more damage. So, it's better to kind of leave it in place.
Thank you.
But you're muted.
Oh, Chair Gima, your mic is muted.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I couldn't hear you. It sounds great. It sounds expensive. Is there some way that this is going to exact an exorbitant cost to your average Lānaʻi citizen in the future?
No, not it. There wouldn't be any cost to any of the residents on Lānaʻi. We hope to just improve the amount of capacity and the speed of capacity coming into the island, and add, resiliency to the internet connectivity, broadband connectivity you have today. The system is majority funded by the state of Hawaii via federal grants, and the difference is also being funded by private equity investment, which is not passed on to the citizens.
So Spectrum and Hawaiian Tel are not going to surprise us with a horrible bill.
Well, they should be able to. Well, I can't really say how they're going to operate their business. However, theoretically, they should have faster and a lot more capacity. So via the economics of it all, one would think they could lower prices. However, I don't think in practical purposes we see that happening a whole lot, But we, I guess we have to wait and see how it pans out. But I don't think you'll see higher rates. I don't think.
All right. Great questions and comments. Last call. Comments on this agenda item. Hearing none, thank you very much, Lisa, Cliff, and Chris. And I guess we shall see you in the future when the SMA permit comes before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, moving on the agenda, Director's Report. Danny?
Thank you, Chair. So for Director's Report, item B1, we have the completed and open Lānaʻi applications report. First item is the Pacific Cancer Foundation, the annual Lānaʻi Paddle for Life event. That event came before this commission. That's why it's under the completed list. Second item, and Lisa touched on this earlier, is the applicant, Hawaiian Islands Fiber Link, requesting an SMA minor permit to do archaeological inventory testing. And basically, as you folks are aware, they will have to come in for a SMA permit in the future. And then part of that would be they would need to include an archaeological inventory survey. Part of doing an archaeological inventory survey is subsurface testing. And it states here that basically they will need to do one backhoe assisted test excavation at the proposed beach manhole location, approximately 5 feet by 7 feet in size and extending to a depth of about 2 meters or 6 feet or so. So that's the SMA permit before you. And Robin is on the line to answer any questions, and so is Lisa. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Danny. Commissioners, questions or comments on the approved projects list? All right, moving on.
Thank you, Chair. Item B2 is the status of the SMA minor permit rule amendments, and I will hand it over to Adrian to address. Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Aloha, Chair, and rest of the commissioners. So yes, we're currently in the process of transmitting it to Mayor's office. It's got to finish review for the Ramsey formatting. It's kind of extensive, but that should be done by the end of this week. That'll get transmitted back to Lānaʻi and Planning for your signature, Butch. Then it will go to the Mayor's office. He'll sign off, and then it'll get transmitted to County Clerk. And then within 10 business days of them receiving that transmission, it will go into effect. So anticipating it should be done by next month's meeting. Yeah.
Commissioners, any comments or questions? Adrian, what's your understanding on the snail's pace of this process?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion on sort of like the flow of the transmission. So luckily a few weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago now, there was clarification on that. So there was official publication of the process of creating or amending new administrative rules. So now that that's in place, everyone's on the same page about what needs to happen, and we're following that appropriately. So the Ramsey hearing also, it's kind of been stuck in Corp Council for the past couple of weeks, just because it's extensive and it's really sort of like detail oriented on the exact proper formatting. It's just one of those things. Anytime there's new enactments of law or amendments to the official rules, the formatting piece is actually quite important, but it is a bit time consuming. So but I think that should be done by the end of this week, and then you should see it hopefully by next week for your signature, and then just mayors, county clerks, and then we're good to go.
It's my understanding that the planning department is taking the position that all SMA minors that come before you now will come to our planning commission. Is that accurate?
Those are the rules. Yeah, that was the amendment that you folks had voted on.
Yeah, and Chair, just to add to that, that's partially why we're bringing like today's item to you folks. Technically, that is a SMA minor with the, I guess, existing / old rules. That would be something the department would approve and then notify you folks later. But we're trying to be proactive and bring it before you folks prior to approval.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, and last item B3, agenda items for next month's meeting, which will occur on September 16th. Right now, we only have one item, and it's a resolution that Greg is going to bring before you. It's a resolution from the Maui County Council, resolution 26-68, and essentially it has to do with ag subdivisions. It's introduced by Councilmember Tamara Paulton, and basically my understanding is it's a requirement that if there is a subdivision on ag land, that the subdivider has to notify any lessees that they are coming in for a subdivision. So what I think happened was there was a company or farm like leasing ag land, and then the owner ended up selling their property and they didn't realize this was happening, and they had a lot of investment into the property. So Councilmember Paulton is wanting people to notify their lessees in advance that the land might be sold. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Commissioners, any requests for agenda items for our September 16th meeting? I'd like to include in the director's report the upcoming vacancies for March 31st, 2027. And I want that on the agenda because in order to fill those 3 spots, we're going to need applications from Lānaʻi residents to be submitted to the county before December 31st, 2026. So I want this on people's radar screen every month so you guys can start thinking about who we want to approach in terms of submitting applications.
Chair, I have a question. It's
Uh-huh.
Sandy. I just want to know what's the status on our First Hawaiian Bank? Like, what's happening with that since it's county? You know, it's counties, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be on the agenda, but what's the status on that? It's just a vacant property that none of our community can currently use. So I feel like it's, yeah, something that should be talked about.
I'm trying to think of a way that it can be on the agenda. And if it can't, then I can share information with you outside the meeting, because we cannot discuss it tonight because it's not on the current agenda. So if you can think of a way on getting it on next month's agenda, you still have time between now and probably maybe a couple of weeks to get it on the agenda. So yeah, let's talk about it after the meeting.
Okay.
I can attempt to find out whatever we can, and then if it's okay, Adrian, could we give that to Leilani, and Leilani could send that email out to the members? Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think as long as it just sort of, it ties to the purpose and the authority of the Lānaʻi Planning Commission, I think it's totally fair game.
Okay. And that way, yeah, we don't have to try and finagle language for an agenda. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioners, everybody going to be at next month's meeting? Michelle?
Yeah, I had a question, so I know that in a past meeting, we were told that the Lānaʻi community plan was kind of on delay depending on, because they're kind of going through all the different planning commissions per island. And I was trying to look through my notes, and I know that there was some kind of discussion on like when our next big community plan discussion is gonna happen, because I think we're expired, no? Or like the review or something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to defer to our long range division since they handle the community plan amendments. But what I will say is that historically, County Maui has always been like way behind on all the community plans. And with Jackie, well, now she's a director, but she was in charge at long range. She sped it up, but it's still, we're not meeting like the timelines that may have been listed. So I believe, what was it? It was either Lānaʻi or Molokai that came first. Then it went to West Maui, and then South Maui, which the council is still reviewing, and then it's going into Central. And so there's like a sequence, and it'll probably be quite some time before it comes back to Lānaʻi, to be honest. But I don't know what the exact timeline on that is.
Would you mind doing a little bit of research and finding out at least where we are in the queue? Or also like how far, I mean, like I know that you can't give me like a date of like when we're gonna start it, but just I know that there's a process, and I recall a presentation. I forget
at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay. Yeah.
I would just love an update of, or at least the sharing of that information, just because I know that we're past due, and I don't want it to be like, hey, how come you guys not doing nothing about it?
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, last call for agenda items for next month. And let me know if you are unable to attend next month's meeting. Okay, we should have quorum, no problem next month then. All right, thank you, everybody.
Uncle Butch, or
Thank
sorry,
you.
Chair. Just as a FYI, I might probably won't be able to make next month. Sorry, I was just pulling up my calendar when you were asking. It's homecoming week on Lānaʻi.
Okay.
And it's expensive, and I also there's been changes, so it's a little bit more intensive in terms of advisor manpower. But I'll share with you later. But I can anticipate not being there because it's the third Wednesday, right? Yeah, I count me out. So if you need extra quorum, or are we at quorum if I don't show?
We'll have quorum.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, if there are no objections, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.